Welcome to Survivor Voices Show with me, your hostess, Vennie Kocsis. I am the author of Cult Child and other publications, which you can explore on my website, VennieKocsis.com. That is VennieKocsis.com. Survivor Voices Show is dedicated to providing a platform for trauma survivors to tell our stories in a safe space. Each show will bring you a plethora of topics from authors to artists, survivors living with impairments, healing journeys, updated news, and real, raw, vulnerable moments of laughter and sometimes tears. Find me on Twitter using hashtag Survivor Voices. Connect with me on Facebook at Survivor Voices Show page. Join our Facebook group, Survivor Voices, where you will find support and be embraced as you share your life. Thank you for being here. And now, here is our show. You know, my guest today really, in my opinion, is truly a shining example of exactly what it means to be a victor. And Matt Pappas is a really outspoken survivor of child sexual rape. People call it abuse. We call it rape because that is what it is. It's being taken without consent. He's the owner of Surviving My Past. It's a very successful blog where he shares free information about the effects of sexual abuse, healing methods. He has a free book you can download. I mean, there's so much, and it is really, truly an exceptionally well put together site. So visit survivingmypast.net and spend some time exploring Matt's work. So Matt, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with me today. I really appreciate you being here. How's your Sunday going?
Vennie, what's shaking, my friend? How are you? I'm doing pretty well. I try and use Sundays at some downtime, and it doesn't always work out that way, but I am trying to relax a little bit. So taking in some football, doing a little self-care, and just kind of chilling. And now hanging out with you.
Yay! Well, you know, I am so glad. And I connected with all of your group on Twitter, probably, I don't know, maybe it's almost been a year. And for anybody listening, if you're on Twitter, you've got to connect with some hashtags. No more shame, sex abuse chat, even the hashtag sex abuse. You'll find people like Matt, Athena Moberg, Bobby Parrish, Rachel Thompson. I mean, all this group of survivorship on Twitter, right, Matt? I was mind blown. I was like, wow, this is amazing. The most supportive, just kind and really truly loving people. And you're one of them. And I'm really privileged to know you. And I'm hoping that you'll, start out letting the listeners get to know you and your story and what happened to you as a kid, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Cool. Well, thank you, Vennie. Yeah, the hashtag No More Shame is really an incredible resource. As you mentioned, it's online. It's through Twitter. Anybody can follow it. You just search hashtag No More Shame all together, all one word or one phrase, whatever. And the hashtag, of course, is most active on Monday evenings. That's when Athena does her live stream on YouTube, where a bunch of us all come together on the hashtag and also on the YouTube channel as well. And everybody just comes together. They share. It's a vulnerable place, but it's a safe place where you can come. You know that you'll be heard. You can ask questions. You can receive support. You can give support. It's really an amazing place to come every Monday night. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I'm the moderator of the YouTube chat. We have a great counterpart named Dawn. She's at Song Warriors. She's the moderator of the Twitter chat. It's really, honestly, it's a place where anybody can join. You can come and receive support as a survivor, whether it's, childhood sexual abuse, whether it's any other type of abuse. It's really all about you all coming and receiving healing, and just being around people who are safe, people who are survivors, people who know what it's like to, endure horrific amounts of trauma And so, yeah, it's a great place. I'm proud to be affiliated with it and to really just help facilitate that group and, really just help keep moving it forward so we can help as many as possible. Because, as you know, there are just countless millions of people all over the world who are survivors just like you and I. So the more help that we can give to them in any way is always an amazing thing to do.
So what do you feel comfortable sharing about your own experiences that brings you to this place? Like, I know for me, part of my healing process from my childhood abuse is being a support person for others too. I mean, even if it's online, which is comfortable for me, right? Are you comfortable sharing what your childhood was like, what happened, what brought you to this place where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. It's all kind of an open book, so to speak, open story on my blog. I talk about it on there. It's also on my podcasts and stuff. So, yeah. As you mentioned, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and that happened when I was between 5 and 10 years old, growing up in South Central Pennsylvania, typical, suburban neighborhood, more or less. My dad was retired Navy, is retired Navy. And then he worked in a factory after that. My mother owned her own business for a long time. So I had both parents there. I was the youngest. I am the youngest. I keep saying was. I am the youngest of 3 kids. I'm the baby, so to speak. So I really kind of had a single, like an only child upbringing, even though because my sister and brother were both way older than me. So my memories of having a brother and sister in the house is slim to none, like very minimal. So in any event, my dad worked a lot. He worked second shift. He worked third shift. So I always enjoyed spending time with him. My mother was emotionally absent for most of the time. And of course, I write about that on the blog and the whole narcissistic abuse thing, which I'll get to later. Okay. So in any event, between 5 and 10, and honestly, I can't put any more of a definitive time frame than that, at least not yet. There was a neighbor up the street whose first name was Kevin, and I won't say his last name, obviously, but he was a teenager. So I'm between 5 and 10. He's 16, 17-ish. His family and mine had been friends for a long time. His dad worked in the garage where my parents took their cars, all that kind of typical neighborhood stuff. And I had grown up around him, so to speak, because they were like half a block from my house, right in the same neighborhood up the street. Really how it all started, and the first real memory I had, I think, was when one day, a fall day, I was outside doing something in my house. I don't remember what, but I heard a mini bike riding around up the street in this field, which was behind his house. So, of course, me being the curious child and nobody around but me, I wandered up the street and saw him riding this mini bike around. And so I, after doing this for a little while, he saw me looking at him, caught his eye, whatever. He stopped. And he knew me, so, it wasn't like I was a stranger, but he stopped and said hello, and I said hi. And of course, me being the little kid who loved motorcycles already, I was like, dude, it's a cool bike. It's an awesome bike, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you want to ride? And I'm 5 to 10 and I'm like, this, somebody's offering to give me a ride on a motorcycle. I'm like, yeah. So nobody's around but me, obviously, and him. So we rode around the field and, rode around for, I don't know how many times. And then he dropped me off. And I said thanks, and I went home. And that was the start of what happened with the abuse. And I can go into as much detail as you want. It doesn't bother me. So, but in any event, that's kind of where it started, where he knew, and I fully believe that he was using that situation to groom me and to get me to come down there because he knew I liked motorcycles. And he had always had motorcycles, not just the mini bike, but other things. So that's what started it all. And going down there, this happened many times, in the evenings after school, Saturday afternoon, Sunday, whatever, when my parents were doing whatever. And I was just being a kid climbing trees and hanging around my house. And, he, would take me on rides and ride around this field. And eventually he would let me sit up front and he would sit behind me. And I can see where, and I can imagine that you kind of know where this is going.
Yes.
So, so we did that a few times. And again, this, the grooming process took place over, I can't say how long because I don't know, but I know it was multiple times, visits, rides, whatever.
Right.
And so me, of course, I became more and more enthralled because here's this teenage kid who I thought was super cool. This is, early 80s. So, to me, he's a cool teenager with the cool clothes and the cool hair and the mini bike. And, back in the day, everybody, the guys had long hair and the comb sticking out of your pocket, the big white high top sneakers. Like, to me, this is the epitome of cool. I'm like, this dude is badass. Mm-hmm. He's cool. And now I'm cool. And now people are going to think that I'm cool and people are going to like me. And now I suddenly have a friend. I can tell my friends that I have a buddy who rides a motorcycle. And he let me ride a motorcycle. And he takes me for rides. And he thinks I'm cool. And, we hang out after school and all this stuff. So, of course, that's the mentality I took. My parents knew I was going down there to ride after a while because they, I would say, hey, I'm going down to ride with Kevin. Sure, go ahead. Whatever, So, and we can get into the debate of whether or not you should let a 5 to 10-year-old ride around with a 16-year-old in the mini bike, but we can get to that later if you want. Mm-hmm. But because that plays into the whole emotional neglect and everything else.
Well, so, I am curious, and this, I'm learning about this now, talking more to males. If the grooming process is different with a boy than it is a girl, like he really latched on to something that you loved, and that, yes, I do understand that, sitting on the lap, sitting in the front. Yes, I get that. I was groomed by lap sitting too. So I do understand that, but yeah, I don't know how much detail you want to go into, but I am curious to know, when he began to groom you into the sexual part of your abuse, what kind of mental things did he use to make you think it was okay?
Well, I'll tell you, grooming, for me as a boy, he played to what he knew I was vulnerable with, and he used it to his advantage, obviously to my disadvantage. And so, he found something that he had that he knew I liked, and he just used that time. It wasn't like it was one time ride and then, stuff started happening. It was multiple times of setting me up and, gaining his, for me to gain his trust and to see him as a friend and somebody who was safe. And so it ended up being a situation where, at one point we were going for a ride and it was still fall time weather, because I can remember wearing a flannel shirt, which is one of the reasons I have an aversion to flannel shirts now. But I was wearing like a flannel shirt and corduroy pants and sneakers. And he said, we had been riding around for a while, and I mentioned I was kind of thirsty. So he said, hey, well, you want to go get some iced tea? Or was it lemonade? It was lemonade or iced tea, one or the other. And I said, yeah. So we rode back to his house. Now, like, his property was right behind the house, and you can see his house from my house and vice versa. Fairly clearly. So we parked the mini bike and we went into his house, and he got me a lemonade or an iced tea. And and that's kind of like the first time that it happened, to where we were in, his house had like kind of a back porch that was enclosed in. And it was it wasn't like a normally well-used room, like it didn't smell lived in, like a normal house smells lived in. Right. It smelled very musty. Old 70s style shag carpet, old 70s style furniture, very uncomfortable couches and chairs, very dimly lit. Kind of, like back in the 70s, they had, the lampshades kind of had that really weird off-white glow, like almost like a dingy orangish type of glow. So we sat down there and I was drinking my drink. And that's the first time that it happened, where he said that, essentially that, I've been giving you rides for a while now. And I said, yeah. And, he said that, would you like to do something for me? And that's kind of where it happened, where he began to guilt me first into making me think like, because he did all these nice things for me, I had to do something nice for him. He also played the everybody's doing it, it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I won't hurt you. Nobody has to know. It's our secret. I'm your friend. He used the I will tell people if you don't do it, I will tell people that you are a wimp and you're a nerd and you're a geek and all these other kinds of words. And I will never hang out with you again. I will make sure I will make fun of you. Like, I mean, he even at one point threatened my dog.
Wow.
After several times. So that's initially kind of how it started. Was he groomed me with the bike, lured me in, asking me for a drink, and then from there it was all. It happened multiple times in that same place, in that same room. It also happened in the shed where, like they stored the mini bike and the lawnmowers and all that stuff. It happened in there as well multiple times. I do not know how many times it happened. All I know is it happened a lot.
Because do you have gaps in your childhood? Within that period of time, you have quite a few gaps, I imagine, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps, not only with that, but other things too.
Right.
When you dissociate during, an intense time like that, there's a lot of gaps. I mean, I have memories of what happened, and I exactly, but there's a lot of gaps in my childhood after that I don't recall, just kind of bits and pieces here and there. There's a lot of time that was lost that, I may get back, I may not get back, I don't really know. But there's a lot of things, my childhood for being I don't know, like my parents have always been really well-known people. Everybody likes them, blah, blah, blah. So growing up, everybody thought I was just your typical child. But there was a lot of trauma that took place, not only with that, of course, but with the emotional neglect and then the bullying later in life. So, it was grooming, and he used everything against me that he could, and it was calculated, it was planned, and, he executed his plan pretty flawlessly, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's what people don't understand is that, that is how grooming happens very slowly over time. Somebody said the other day in the chat room, the topic of sexual molestation came up, and someone made this statement that it's solely the responsibility of the parent. And I thought, because you don't always know that your kid is hanging out with the kids in the street, and it's a neighborhood, and it's, they're all playing, and unless you know the signs, you're educated on the signs, you see your child changing, and you're an aware parent where your mother was not, there would have been no way for them to go, wait a minute, something's off here.
Yeah, I mean, and there are obviously, many schools of thought there. I do know that after that happened, I became emotionally closed off, didn't talk to anybody, wasn't as outgoing. I remember my parents saying, up until, even before my parents knew about this, they said, there was a time in your life when you were happy-go-lucky and, all that stuff. And then afterwards, something changed, and you became closed off, and you didn't talk, and you didn't open up, and you had less friends and all that. And, I didn't tell my parents about this for a long decades after. Because I was ashamed, I was scared. Initially, I didn't tell them because he threatened me, threatened my dog, obviously threatened to take away the friendship and everything else. So of course, my dad not being around all the time, not on purpose, just because he had to work. I hold no ill will against him whatsoever. He's an amazing guy. I love him to death. My mom was home all the time. The shop was on the property. But even later, she's admitted, I wasn't there. I was emotionally absent. I was wrapped up in this, that, and the other thing. And, to me, I'm kind of the school of thought of, whether you're in a safe hood or not, letting your 5 to 10-year-old run around and hang out with somebody twice his age is probably not the most best thing to do, the most smartest, healthy thing to do. And so, we can kind of, banter that back and forth if you want.
I absolutely agree with you. And, I'm a grandmother. I have 4 grandchildren. They're 11, 6. And that's exactly how
their parents feel. That no, you hang out with children that are your age, and even then, they're quite particular. But that takes a parental awareness. And I too had a narcissistic mother. Now, of course, my story is a little different, and a cult formed my mother into a narcissist. But yes, when your parent is emotionally absent, in some ways, I kind of, post cult felt that if I was hanging out, I was out of her hair. She didn't really care, right? I was out of her hair. I don't know if your mother was like that. But we also had where everybody loved her. So she had a face she put on to other people. I've even had people from the cult that were teenagers say, "Oh, we loved your mom." And she was a great grandmother. But behind closed doors, she would say the, most horrible things and do the most horrible things and be absent. They wear two faces.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's the case so oftentimes is, when a parent or when anybody is a narcissist, they wear multiple masks.
Mm-hmm.
Mine in particular was everybody loves your mom. She's great. Everybody appreciates her. She is such a shining light, great mother, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. So my parents pretty much walked on water mostly. And so so for me, like, here's this, this younger kid trying to figure out what's going on, enduring all kinds of sexual abuse. And now I'm kind of on the outside looking in, trying to process it. No idea how to make sense of any of it. Blaming myself, ashamed, scared to death, and never telling anybody because of, all the reasons we talked about, being threatened and being ashamed and all that other stuff. So, but yeah, it was definitely a situation where in my case, there wasn't like any kind of physical abuse or, calling me names or anything. It was just complete lack of presence and or emotion. Lot of tough love, suck it up, deal with it, get over it, that kind of crap, which I hate. I hate that. So it was more of, from that side of it, it was really just kind of, I felt alone, like I was on my own. Nobody's going to understand. I can't tell anybody. So, how is a kid supposed to process all of this trauma? I mean, you just can't. There's just no way you can.
Right.
And so you bottle it up and you carry it with you, and you just, it's eating it up inside, and you don't tell anybody. And, that's kind of how you go through life for a long time. That's how I did it.
Yeah. And, I'm very open even about right now. Like for myself, I'm in that middle zone where I'm the child, right? My mother's passed on, but I also was a mother. And, sometimes I was a tough love mom when I should not have been a tough love mom. I should not have been an authoritarian mom in those moments. I should have been that mom, right? And I've even had to deal with this with my own mother. And I don't know if you've had to process this or if you're at that space yet, but as much as the accountability, right? She and I take accountability. At the same time, I understand that I'm a victim of generational trauma.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, being a parent is like the hardest job in the world.
Oh my gosh, yes, it is. And it never ends.
It never, ever ends. I mean, it doesn't matter how old your kids get or how little they are.
Yes.
Oftentimes you just can't win. There's a fine line between tough love and compassion and all, everything else that we deal with as parents. And I mean, you're right. I mean, and oftentimes we're all humans, and sometimes we get caught up in life and this, that, and the other thing. But I mean, I have no doubt that you're an amazing mother to your kids. I know that I cherish my kids as like, they're just the greatest things ever. And I'm grateful that they never gave up on me for all the time.
Me too.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you say this, but I definitely say, my sons are amazing, and they did survive me, and they've taught me, a lot of things about life. I think what made it different was like my mother was very deviant. So I would often have to hold secrets because I would watch her do things, but then like she was a triangulator. So she would do something or say something, say against my sister, but I wasn't allowed to tell my sister, but yet I loved my sister and we were close. So there I was holding this. So she was deviant and underhanded. I wasn't that way. I wasn't that type of person. I've never been that type of person. So that's what I think that narcissism comes in. is where they literally enjoy the game of being a narcissist and creating triangulation, crazy making, that gaslighting type of behavior. Was your mom like that?
My mom mostly enjoyed playing the victim. That was kind of the thing. Sending out the flying monkeys, which, of course, you and I know what that term is. And,
Explain that for everyone, will you?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, and I mean, obviously, you can just Google flying monkeys. And, it's essentially when a narcissist uses other people to get their message across, sending out people to play up how great they are and how bad you are for ignoring them or blaming them, or basically using other people on their side against you. It's kind of like a very simplified way of defining it. Sending out people. Sometimes it's family members, friends, people from a church, people from a community group, other people. They'll send out. Why are you treating your mom like this? She really loves you. She misses you. Why are you ignoring her? She never did anything to you but love you. And why are you acting like this? This is not her fault. It's your fault. And they're using everything in her arsenal against you to make you feel bad. So the narcissist is the victim. That's the one everybody feels bad for. Everybody wants to show compassion to. And before you know it, you're the bad guy.
Yeah, they always need a scapegoat, and they create situations. I agree 100%, where they create this little team. And a lot of times you don't even know, you get blindsided with it. Like, what do you mean?
Absolutely.
Treating her how? What are you talking about, right? You realize like somebody's talking about you and you're clueless.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's what it is, because you're sitting there trying to just, practice self-preservation and take care of yourself. And you're trying to provide and just make your way through life. And all of a sudden you've got people blindsiding you, telling you what a crappy person you are, and you treat your parents bad and they don't deserve it. And they gave you all this, that, and the other thing. And, who are you to treat them so poorly? And, like you said, all of a sudden you're the bad person, when in reality, you're the one that is the true victim in all of this. You're the one that's being treated poorly and blamed and scapegoated, and maybe you're the golden child and all these terms. And so, yeah. And then it starts to cause you to question yourself. Well, maybe they're right. Maybe I am a bad person. Maybe I do suck. Maybe they are right and I'm wrong. Maybe I need to reevaluate. And suddenly, before you know it, you're trying to do self-care and take care of yourself. And now you're in like damage control, trying to figure out which end is up. I mean, it's a wicked game.
It truly is. I mean, and it's not even just parent and child. I mean, I've seen this in corporate relationships. I mean, it's a viral kind of behavior of ganging up and just taking someone down. It's a narcissistic takedown. And yes, I've definitely been in that place where I'm like, well, maybe it is me. I've been in a domestically violent relationship before. So even in that situation, that same type of narcissistic crazy making happens, where you're blamed for everything. So that is, but for a child without an ability to critically process it, and a lot of it, you talk about dissociation. I wanted to say too that, a lot of us walked around in dissociative states, like even for those gaps that we have in our childhood. And I know I'm kind of going back here, but that was something I talked about with my counselor, because I've always felt there's got to be something in those gaps, right? There's something I'm not remembering. But the truth is that sometimes those gaps is a robotic moment of getting through life. There's nothing there. You're just trying to manage. So you've literally shut your mind down.
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, and sometimes too, it's a matter of, as you work with a professional, trauma-informed therapist or counselor or, whatever, you start to process that, and those memories start to come back over time.
Yes.
But sometimes you may never remember. And you're right. It could just be because there really wasn't much going on and you were just kind of there being, just trying to survive. Other times there's other stuff that happened that your mind is like, dude, you are not ready to handle this yet.
Yes.
And so it's like, I'm going to keep it hidden from you. And of course, that's what, our brain keeping us safe and our mind keeping us safe during trauma, by dissociating, by taking us away and kind of allowing us to not be fully present, to protect us and oftentimes to save our life. And of course that creates gaps in time and, obviously, all types of things surrounding dissociation. But it's really just, it's a self-preserving state that your mind goes into of, something's going on here and, we need to protect ourselves. And even, years and years of therapy and whatnot, new memories come back and you realize, I may get those blank spaces in time come back next year, 10 years from now. They may never come back. It really is just kind of, how you work through trauma, how you process it. And, it's just one of the situations that you live with and you come to kind of just deal with, is that, you may never remember everything. You may remember everything. Everybody's different.
Yeah. When I was writing Cult Child, it took me 5 years just to put the timeline together. That's why I'm a big supporter of writing therapy. That to me, and Kathy O'Brien has a book, PTSD, Time to Heal, that is truly brilliant. It gives you exact tasks of how to dig into your memory and write it out. But it is hard to put your timelines together. And I had to do a lot of fact checking. I'm so grateful for my brother and sister to be able to be there, right? Because not everybody has that privilege really to have someone help verify timelines. But we struggled for some things to, when did this happen? Okay, what age might I have been? But it took me 5 years just to get that timeline together, to organize the memories I did have. And yes, then the memories that emerged as I wrote. So that really was very unexpected for me, that it was going to take me that long. And then it only took me 2 years to actually write the book. But the timeline took me forever.
Oh, yeah. Writing therapy is just incredibly healing.
Yes.
It helped me tremendously. When I first started working with a therapist, I had done blogging and writing, but it was always for sports. So I wasn't processing anything. I was just writing for sports and for some websites I used to work with. But then once I started working with a therapist and we started processing things, I started to journal. And that's kind of what really got me down the road of being a blogger for, myself, and was really journaling. And then the stuff that would come out when I was writing outside of therapy was just mind blowing. I was just writing. And I was just writing and things were coming out and stuff I didn't remember and was starting to come out. And then I would take that in and process and say, hey, look what I came up with this week. And we would talk about it and do all the things you do in therapy. But writing really has been the catalyst for me to really take my healing journey to the next level. The first step was seeking out professional help to make sense of it all. But then really taking my own healing by the reins and saying, and by writing, and, of course, then that's how the blog got started and whatnot. But writing and for me also podcasting has just been ridiculously awesome in terms of healing. It's just so, when you write down your thoughts on paper or, type them out, as I prefer to do, or you're talking about it on a podcast or something, the healing is just exponential because you're getting it out there. You're not stuffing it. You're not avoiding it. You're not suppressing it like I did for 30 some years.
Right. Me too.
Yeah. And once you do that, it's mind blowing what you start to remember. And then that's really, of course, important for you to be kind to yourself and take it slow and work with somebody to really help you make sense of it all. Because as I was writing it, stuff was just coming out and I didn't really understand it all. But
right.
It was like my mind said, okay, Matt, let's start to deal with this stuff a little bit. And so I did, and it's just been an absolutely tremendous healing tool for me, and really just, has really taken my healing to the next level and how, allowed me to heal and continue healing at a exponential rate.
I totally agree. I always have something to write with. There's always a little notebook in my purse with a pen. Because thoughts will come to me, even memories. Sometimes I may get a fragment of something and I'll write it down. I may not know exactly what it means in that moment, but maybe later more will come. And I've had this happen many times where I'm like, oh, I wrote that down. Okay, now this makes sense. Even stream of consciousness writing, dumping your head from the day. so-and-so pissed me off at work today. I really don't want to go back tomorrow. But you know what? I'm going to watch my favorite show. Like whatever is in your head, I'm a big supporter of that type of writing too. Like a lot of people will say, I'm not a good writer. But you don't have to be a good writer. You don't even have to spell words right because it's not about that, right? It's about just taking it from inside of yourself and getting it out. And when I was in, people say suppression, and I also look at traumatic amnesia, where for a long time I wasn't dealing with things because I was a single mom. I was working. I couldn't deal with my trauma and life at the same time. I seeped through poetry. But do you know what I mean? Where you just kind of go into this amnesic state where you're like, I'm not even going to face it.
Oh, yeah. I did that for 30 years. I honestly did. Unbeknownst to me, it was affecting every area of my life. Growing up in school, I had zero self-esteem, no self-confidence. I was more susceptible to bullying. I didn't know that I was being raised with an emotionally neglectful parent. I just kind of thought that's what it was. But yeah, no, like I went through life and I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. I don't have time to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. It's in the past. It doesn't bother me. Blah, blah, all the things I'm telling myself. And, I went through life and I just pretended it didn't exist. Like,
Did you have behavioral issues though? Like I had behavioral issues, definitely. I could give you a long list of behavioral issues I had. I didn't know how to communicate. I snapped easily. I was having panic attacks and didn't realize it. So it made me look like I was like freaking out. There was so many ways that my trauma was coming out behaviorally, but I was constantly defending myself. So I don't know if you dealt with that during that amnesic, that traumatic, suppressive time.
I chose to deal with it by shutting down. I just wouldn't talk. Like you could not get through to me to save your life. I wouldn't talk, wouldn't open up, wouldn't share, secluded myself. That's kind of how I dealt with it the best. It's just, I didn't really lash out a whole lot, although I always felt the need to defend myself,
Me too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's part of it. But generally I dealt with it by just closing down. I wasn't a big person to lash out or get angry or snap. I just said nothing. I would just clam up and say, you know what, I'm done. And I wouldn't say a word. And I lived my life in that state for a long, long, long time. And that's how I chose to deal with it. And then I did see a therapist when I was teenager-ish. I don't remember when. And
had you told your parents what led you there? Was it your
well, my parents basically drugged me to a therapist.
Got you.
Because they wanted me to talk to somebody. So I went and talked to them. And I told this therapist everything. The whole abuse, the whole 9 yards.
Really?
And then the therapist at some point, like I don't know how many sessions it was that I went to see her. But then she told my parents, so she totally broke the whole confidentiality, and she told my parents what I had told her. And then my parents went and told them all the rest of my family. So now I went from this
kid.
Were you
a minor?
Yeah, I was.
So was she in a position where she was bound because you were a minor to report? And should the report have actually been to the authorities towards your abuser?
Well, I didn't tell the therapist who the abuser was. Like I didn't name names or anything. I just said the kid up the street. And I had said his first name and that's all I ever said.
Gotcha.
But she told my parents what had happened. And she says to this day that I gave permission for them to do that. I don't remember ever giving permission to tell my parents anything. So that just really that was unbelievably traumatizing because I get home, my parents are bawling, falling all over me, trying to tell me how sorry they are. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Oh.
And so that just caused me to clam up even more. And then I've got my sister and my brother and everybody in the family calling me going, oh my God, I didn't know. And I'm like, you guys, it was totally overwhelming. And I shut down even more. I'm like, you know what? I told somebody, they double crossed me. Screw you. I'm done.
Right. So that probably really put
that was a major setback.
Yeah. And a dark mark on therapy. And of course, it never helps when you are in trauma and everybody else around you is crying and so they're being comforted and you're kind of sitting there like, hello, I'm the victim here. Right.
Right. Yep.
And I didn't consent, I wasn't ready for this yet. Yeah, that's definitely a violation. So
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
that
that
deterred you
set me
from
back.
therapy.
Oh yeah. I didn't seek a therapist at all until until I started this new healing journey in 2015.
Wow.
So at that point, I'm like, you know what? I am so done. This is never going to happen again. I'm never going to be taken advantage of. Screw you, screw everybody, screw the world. I'm going to figure this out on my own. And of course, then by my definition of figuring out was I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen. And so I just went about life and I just did my thing and I was just never thought about it, didn't focus on it, rarely ever talked about it. If somebody ever brought it up that I did know, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore. It was in the past and I would move on. And that's how I chose to quote unquote deal with it for, as I said, decades until I went to see a therapist after my second marriage had ended in divorce. And I'd initially sought her out, not for this, just to kind of, help me put my life together after being, a single parent again and, trying to figure out how just to make it my way through life being alone. And then the whole trauma survivor and recovery morphed out of that.
Right.
So
yeah, same for me. I wrote Cult Child without any therapeutic support, and growing up in the cult, they taught us that psychiatrists were the Antichrist and, workers of the devil, and they were there to control your mind. And they very much, and we were also a faith healing cult. So I had an aversion, a deep aversion. I hated psychiatry. And I still sometimes have a little bit of aversion to academia because I think we're in a different time. But I have an amazing therapist. And one, I can say the thing that I've gained the most from her is now I have a language to communicate what I went through, because it's such an awkward moment, or was an awkward moment to be in, where you kind of freeze and go, now I can say it. And that was really, really helpful. I mean, was very helpful. That's what I've gained the most is communication skills about my experience.
Yeah. I mean, the first time that I had verbalized that I was a survivor, we were doing a writing exercise through a DBT skills workbook. Mm-hmm. And I had written it out. And, she was like, and now I think I put this on my intake form at the time when I first started, but I wasn't really focusing on it because I was asking her to help me focus on putting my life back together from being divorced and all that. Right. But when it came out, she had already had a bit of a background about what it was. And when I first verbalized all these things to her, and she helped me process it and understand it. It was a safe place. And, she told me that I was a survivor. That was a pretty freeing experience. Like, I never forget the first time I learned what a survivor was. I mean, up until 3 years ago, I thought Survivor was a friggin' TV show and that was it.
Right.
Like, literally, I did. I'm like, a survivor? Okay, that's television, whatever. Mm-hmm. But when I realized that I was a survivor and, that that it was okay and that, I wasn't broken and busted and it wasn't hopeless and that, talking about this didn't make me weak and, all these other things. That was a pretty freeing experience. Yes. And that really just catapulted the journaling, the healing, the education, the blog. That's how Surviving My Past got started in early 2016. Mm-hmm. As a place for me to just start writing and saying, okay, I did some research and I was like, I just Googled childhood sexual abuse blogs and things like that. And I started seeing other people who were writing about this stuff. And I'm like, well,
you're not alone.
I don't know if anybody's ever going to want to read this, but I'm going to put it out there because I'm pretty good at building websites and I can run a blog. So let me just take a shot and, maybe give myself a little project to do. And, that's, I was laying in bed one night about 2:30 in the morning, literally just, couldn't sleep. And I'm laying there trying to sleep. And suddenly, the thought pops into my head, Surviving My Past. I'm like, holy crap. I jumped up, went over and bought the domain that night, like, in the middle of the night. And that's how Surviving My Past was born. And then I put a WordPress blog up on there, a couple of days later, and I started writing. And, as you mentioned before, with writing therapy, you don't have to be an author. You don't have to be a professional writer. You just write. Doesn't matter what your grammar is. Doesn't matter how you spell something. Just get it out there and people read it.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, as helpful as it is to you, you know, it's helpful to other people when they start reading about your experiences, because they're like, my God, somebody else went through this. Somebody else gets me.
Yes.
I'm not alone. And suddenly you start getting these people who start reading your blog and they're sharing it and they're messaging you and, you know, thanking you for sharing your voice. And, you know, you realize that the community of survivors out there who are just looking for somebody to believe them, somebody to give, you know, help them, give them inspiration to share their story and to reach out for help. And, you know, that's just really, Surviving My Past is really all about, originally it was just my own little therapy blog that I thought, you know, maybe somebody will read once in a while. And, you know, 270 some posts later, I can look back whenever I have doubts about, well, you know, did I really feel this? Did it really go down that way? I'm not really sure. Well, wait a minute, let me go back and search my blog. And sure enough, there's a post or 2 or 3 about something that I'm just thinking about. And that validates me and says, hey, you know what, you did go through this crap and it was horrible. And, you know, here's how you processed it then and here's how you're processing it now. And so writing therapy and blogging has,
Matt, I wanted to bring something up that is probably a sensitive subject, okay?
Sure.
And, you know, I talk, and I'm sure you do, to a lot of sex abuse survivors. And it is a topic that makes people cringe. And I say if it makes you cringe, yay, you're one of the good ones, because it should make you cringe.
Exactly.
But for males, and even, you know, some males that were in the cult that I was in who really truly suffered some horrible abuse, and sodomy was one of them. And one of the things that I noticed that women don't necessarily, like, I never struggled with my sexuality, even though I was sexually abused by a female. I was sexually abused by multiple people, one maybe 2. I'm not sure of the memory's cloudy of the second one. The first one very clear. I never struggled with, am I gay? Am I not gay? But I noticed that a lot of males do. They struggle with, am I gay because I was sodomized as a child? And maybe you can help me understand that, you know, as a male going through that. Is that something you struggled with? And why do guys struggle with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not something that people talk about all that often, of course. And I tell you, I struggled with that decision off and on as I got older, because even though I didn't tell anybody anything, I always knew, obviously, what happened. You know, so, you know, yes, I did struggle with it. I would say for me personally, obviously it's not uncommon, but for me personally, I firmly believe that just because you were sexually abused in any way does not make you one thing or the other. Like it just doesn't. You know, if you're, you know, whether you're gay or straight, whatever, you know, your choices are not defined by your past in general. I mean, in fact, nothing about your future should be defined by your past. And of course, that takes time to work through in therapy and in healing and whatnot. But in terms of this, I did struggle with it. I firmly believe, no, it does not predestine you or make you decide to go one way or the other based on who abused you and how many times or what the situation was. I think a lot of times for guys, it really comes down to this. At least for me, I struggled with the whole man card thing. You know, like the tough guy persona of, you know, guys are supposed to be tough and take care of yourself and, you know, sit around and drink beer, watch football and spit and, you know, all the stuff you're supposed to be doing. But, you know, when you realize that, you know, you were a child and you were abused by somebody and you had no power to stop it, or maybe you were older and you were abused by somebody and you had no power to stop it. It doesn't predestine you to do anything or be any way. But it does take time to work through, because there's a lot of stigma surrounding guys in general to just be the tough guy, handle it yourself, don't show any emotion, don't give in, you know, go out and, you know, find the prettiest girl. And, you know, oftentimes in school, depending on who you date, oftentimes plays into your popularity. And so there's a lot of things that come into that. And then when you are abused and you're ashamed and you feel like you're damaged, and then you start to maybe you don't want to date. Maybe you tried it and you don't like it. Maybe you're not ready for it. That's totally cool. There's no timetable for any of this stuff. It's all, the only timetable is the one that you set for yourself. And so then, of course, you get, when you grow up, if you don't have the hot cheerleader girlfriend or, whatever the case is, then people, kids in school are mean. I mean, we all know that. They just are. And so then they start judging you. And, it's bad enough that you are a survivor and you're trying to figure out life and you feel alone. And then you've got people ridiculing you because you're not going out with certain people and you're not doing things and you're not engaging. And then you say, well, what's wrong with him? Well, maybe he's gay. Maybe he's this. Maybe he's that. And, it's not that there's anything wrong with any of it. It's just that people will judge you based on the way that you act, and you act because you're confused and you don't know how to handle it. And so you just become a recluse, and then you don't interact, you don't go out, you don't do anything, and suddenly people are judging you even more, and then you're questioning yourself, well, why don't I want to go out with somebody? Well, maybe I am this, maybe I am that, maybe I'm broken, maybe nobody wants me. So for me, it was a struggle of trying to fit in with my friends and have this cool, tough guy exterior, I guess you want to call it that, the whole man card thing, and not show any type of emotion either way, not show any kind of vulnerability. I talked about this with my therapist for a while, and I found out from her that it's very common. And obviously I've talked to a lot of people who have felt the same way. They really aren't sure. And, whether you're gay or not, more power to you either way, but it has nothing to do with the fact that you were abused, assaulted, in any way, shape, or form as a child. That does not predestine you to anything. Honestly, I firmly believe that, your preferences for relationships is totally up to you.
Right.
And should be totally up to you, and, should be free from outside influences. Now, that's not to say that people don't try and influence you. I mean, God knows we all know that people want to influence you 9 ways to Sunday for everything.
Well, yeah, because we're in this social construct, and I think this fits into that. Like, we could look at pornography, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Female on female pornography is considered to be sexy, okay, but male on male pornography, it's not, right?
Right.
It's easier for a woman to say to her man, hey, I was abused. But not like, I dated a male not too long ago, actually, and he had some behavioral stuff going on. And then one night we were talking, and he actually revealed to me that he was sexually abused as a child. I felt very honored, naturally. I think it's an honor anytime someone opens up that deeply to you. But I just think we need to consider, in relationships in general, that yes, there's males with behavioral issues, there's women with behavioral issues, and maybe both of them stem from the same types of things. Abuse, right? It's just, for men, like you say, that man card got to be tough, man up, don't cry, don't feel, like, be the protector. You can be strong and be a man and still be vulnerable. In fact, I think vulnerability is the strongest that a person could ever be.
Well, you're right. And I mean, when you are in a relationship with a safe person, with a supportive person, somebody who understands and is considerate and caring, I mean, that when you get to a point where you can share something that is as traumatic, something that is as personal as being abused, I mean, that really opens up a whole new level in your relationship of honesty and trust and intimacy and everything, because suddenly you are trusting this person with a secret that probably not many people know about. Mm-hmm. And, you're sharing it in a vulnerable state, and you are allowing them to come into your space, and you're allowing them to help you and to support you and to listen and to give you a hug if you want it, or to just be there, or to understand that, when you're having some kind of a moment, perhaps it's, perhaps you're just having a bad day and you're not saying anything. Maybe you're lashing out. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're crying. Maybe you're just really emotional. A lot of, trauma takes hold of your life and forms and manifests itself in many ways. And when you get somebody who understands at least a little bit, or even if they don't understand, if they're just holding a safe space for you to come and hang out in, and not necessarily solve your problem, but just listen, that is life-changing. And being intimate and vulnerable and compassionate is like the sexiest trait ever. I mean, it really is.
I so agree. I so agree. And I mean, I can even now, right? I'm single, and I don't consider dating relationships, right? But, I've been single from a relationship for many, many years. But I would imagine, and even in that dating situation, when I see that someone has an adverse behavior, that's where my mind goes now. Like, okay, anger is not a base emotion. Pain is. So if someone is angry, someone is lashing out, somebody's hurt them in their life. And that's then there's this point for me that I say, okay, I can see you from the wound in which you stand. Now, does that wound impede upon my boundaries that are my boundaries for my safeness? And if it does, that's the moment I make the decision to walk away.
Yeah, very well said. And, you're right. Obviously, if you are somebody who's dating somebody, you don't go out on your first date and start, disclosing all this kind of stuff. It's something, if you get in a situation where you develop over time and,
yes,
you start to get closer and you create that safe space. You're right. One of the things that I see a lot of times when I see somebody lashing out, I kind of think, maybe something happened to them. Maybe they haven't processed something. Maybe this is how they're dealing with it. And of course, it's not that I'm judging them, not by any stretch. It's just having that kind of compassionate awareness that perhaps there's something deeper than it's just because, you forgot to get milk when you went to the store or whatever. Understanding.
There's something, right? Even things, this is where I think like deep mindfulness comes into play, because what if someone had, like, for instance, me, I was beat about my head as a child. So I never considered through my life that maybe I had a little brain injury, and that's why I was kind of scatterbrained and forgetful. I never could connect that until my therapist helped me. But looking at someone who might say have a forgetfulness issue, instead of screaming at them, you forgot everything, maybe they've had some injuries in their lives. Maybe there's some emotional things. These are the things that are important for me to educate about, down to that small level, like forgetting milk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. And, I think the main key is, whether you are, you're in a relationship with someone or you're, a friend or whatever, I think it's important for us, as survivors ourselves, as advocates of and really just as human beings, to just be compassionate and to understand that maybe there's something else going on, and that it's not our job to fix it. It's not our job to judge them. It's not our job to do anything other than create a safe space, be a friend, be understanding, listen when they want to speak, offer them support. If they ask for our help, of course, give it lovingly and compassionately and understanding, knowing that there's probably, that there could be a lot of deep-seated trauma that has manifested itself in ways that they don't know how to process yet. And this is the only thing that they know. In terms of the whole forgetfulness, like I always say, I would forget my head if it wasn't attached.
Me too.
Me too. Oh my God. I live by my calendar. I live by like notes on the refrigerator and notes on my car seat when I leave for work. It says, get milk.
Yes, me too. Like my phone. And even before technology, I was carrying around a planner.
Oh, yeah. I have to write everything down. Now, my family says that's kind of a family trait because my brother's the same way. So I don't know how much of it is related to the abuse, although I am sure that it is exacerbated by the abuse.
Right.
And, it's just kind of like a side effect of it. But absolutely, yeah. The real key is, when somebody, when somebody and you are close to them, it's really just, especially once they disclose that they're a trauma survivor, if that's the case, or they've endured something else traumatic. Maybe it's they were, over, fighting for our country, or maybe they were, just gone through a hurricane or something. That's all traumatic too. And, trauma is all different types of ways. And so, not everybody has, unfortunately, the resources to be able to speak to a professional. And so they only deal with it the way that they naturally know how. And perhaps that's to shut down or to lash out or to do whatever. So, having an understanding and just the awareness that maybe somebody's going through something is really gives you a very unique perspective and kind of a very soft heart for people who have been through something traumatic.
It really does. And I really relate to veterans, and you probably do too. I mean, I have complex PTSD, which the only...
Same here.
Right. So, I was going to mention that you only see complex PTSD in children and veterans of war, which is very profound to me because child abuse is a battle, but the side effects are the same. And I really like to share these methods with vets, and I see them being implemented using poetry, writing, art, all of that is such an important way to expel. And I notice the more that I create, even like I said, if it's dumping my head in a stream of consciousness writing, the less that I feel tightness in my skin, anxieties, you're getting it out, you know what I mean? And people need to not discount that people have certain our impairments can't be seen. And people forget them very easily. Like, I'm deaf in my right ear. So sometimes my audio is elevated. That's often forgotten. It's very difficult for people to remember someone's unseen impairments. They're invisible impairments, as I call them. So I hope to educate on mindfulness. And I wanted to ask you, you're a part of the Good Men Project, right?
Yep, I sure am.
I really love them and was hoping that you could share a little bit about them and what you guys do.
Well, yeah, I do write weekly a column on the Good Men Project that comes out every Monday. And really, the Good Men Project is it's really an amazing thing that I'm glad I hooked up with. Now, I write a course in the mental health and wellness category, but it's really just a place where not only guys writing. I mean, there are women writers on the Good Men Project, but it's about having the conversation that nobody wants to have, and whether that's about trauma or recovery or anything. I mean, anything at all. It's about sharing and being open and honest. It's about really just having those tough talks with yourself and with the people around you and getting things out that nobody wants to really deal with, and would rather just kind of push under the rug. And so my story of a survivor and the stuff that I write on there is, of course, really just to help me share in an atmosphere that is surrounded by people who are as passionate about their causes as I am about mine. And of course, the Good Men Project is really, it's about, lifestyle, healthy eating, health and wellness, mental health, physical, working out, running, everything, any kind of topic under the sun. They do all types of, they cover politics, the whole 9 yards. It's really just a place where guys can share their story, their feelings, and where women write as well, either perhaps two guys or as a spouse of a guy. It's really just an amazing place that I'm glad that they are allowing me the privilege to share my stories each week there, whether it's a podcast or a post or whatever, because the message they have is just of unity, of equality, of inspiring, of encouraging, of validating, and really, there's no judgment. There's all kinds of writers from all walks of life with all different types of views, for as the day is long. It's all over the place, but everybody comes and shares in a judgment-free atmosphere, and it inspires conversation, and it's really a great place to be. So I'm honored that I can say that I'm a writer on the Good Men Project, because I appreciate their message and the way that they go about it. I'm part of a social interest group. I did a social interest group several months ago called Not Weak, Just Human, which was guys coming together, and we did a campaign where we recorded a video and blog posts talking about something that we've been through, something that we're going through. For some of them, it's being the parent of an autistic child. Some of them, it's being abused as a child. Some of it's living with depression, suicide survivor, stay-at-home parents. And, it's trying to erase this perception that, you're not weak because you've gone through something or you're dealing with something. You're just human. And that was a great social interest group that I was in, and I'm in another one now where we're just starting to tackle some other issues. So the message they have is really just incredible, and I'm really grateful to be a part of it.
I love it. I mean, I've watched them grow from the beginning. And, you know, my son is a stay-at-home dad, and they have that dynamic, and it works just great for their family. M. Dolan Hickman is a real popular author of 1324. He's a stay-at-home dad, and I love it. I love to see these dynamics that these families are figuring out, hey, what works best for us, and kind of like screw what anybody else's ideal of what a family is supposed to look like, because it's really supposed to look like love. And the Good Men Project really addresses that and allows men to have a safe space to feel, like you said, with no judgment. And I love that. And I think it's so great that you are a part of that. Can you tell us where people can go and read your column there?
Yeah, actually, if you just go over to the Good Men Project, just Google it. If you search for my name, Matt Pappas, or you could actually search. When I first started writing on my blog and for the Good Men Project, I was going by a pen name or an alias. So, my handle on there for a long time was Lyric, and so I went by that for a while. But if you just search Matthew Pappas, you'll find a lot of my stuff on there, or search Surviving My Past. Either one of those, you'll find my articles on there. Some of them are posts from my own blog. Some of them are originals. Some of them it's podcast. But it's really, I enjoy being able to share my content there. My editor, Dixie, is just incredible. She's so awesome. Very understanding. Even when I get my weekly post in really late, which I don't ever do, but sometimes. But no, it's a great place. And I enjoy the kind of camaraderie, the safe place, and giving guys a voice who want to write and podcast and all that and do videos and stuff. To just say, hey, I'm a guy and I feel this way and I think that. And, this is what's going on in my world. And people read it and they share it and they validate you. And they, it's really kind of an amazing movement and a resource for, really anyone to check out.
Hey, tell our audience about on your website. I know you have a free book that they can download. So I was hoping you maybe would share a little bit about that too, because hello, free,
No, right? Yeah, free's great. I love free.
Free is great. Yes.
Yeah, I wrote an ebook that I published last year. It's called Surviving Grief, and it really takes you through the 5 stages of grief from a trauma survivor perspective. And as you know, grieving your past is a really, really important part of healing.
Yes.
Grief doesn't just come from the loss of a loved one or the loss of a pet or the loss of a job. Those are all extremely traumatic things, but you also need to grieve the childhood that you never had. Mm-hmm. You need to grieve the things that you never got to experience. You need to grieve how you felt and why you felt it and what you went through. And so this ebook, which of course, you can download for free. There's links all over the blog. And you'll get it instantly. You'll get a copy in your email, and then of course it opens up into a PDF that you can read right away. And I also recorded it in audiobook format, so you can download it as an MP3. And so it really just kind of walks you through, being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and narcissistic abuse and bullying, and what does that feel like, when you're in denial and when you're angry and when you're feeling depression, and what does it feel like to radically accept that, and to kind of go through all the 5 phases as it relates to what you lost and what you went through, and understanding that, the 5 stages of grief, while there's generally accepted to be 5 separate phases, you go through these phases at different intervals and different stages, and that there's no right or wrong way to go about it, and that you may go from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 1 to 2 to 5. Like, you just kind of it's okay that you're processing things differently. Mm-hmm. And it's okay that you're grieving your past in your own way, and understanding things, like it wasn't your fault, and understanding what bargaining is and how that relates to trauma survivors, and understanding what it means to accept. And, knowing that, just because you accept being a survivor doesn't mean that you approve of it. You certainly don't condone being sexually abused.
Right.
But when you move into that acceptance role, you understand that, yes, this happened. It was horrible. It was terrible. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy ever. But it happened. Now, what am I going to do about it? And how can I live my life? How can I take my life back? How can I learn from it? How can I maybe help others? and inspire others. So that's really kind of what it was born, was me learning when I was working with a therapist and a life coach that, you have to process this grief, and that I was grieving it, and that it was okay to be angry, and then it was okay to go through denial and everything, and to that understand that there's nothing wrong with that, and that it's important. It's an important part of your healing journey to grieve whatever it is you went through, because once you grieve it and then you get to that acceptance part, if you end up going back into some of the other stages, or something else traumatic happens, whatever it is, you now know that you made it through ABC situation, and now you have power, and you have understanding, you have self-compassion and awareness, and you are resilient for surviving what you did, and you can use that strength to your advantage should something else come up in the future. So I created it to be free. It's always going to be free. I'm working on some other resources, but this one, no matter what, I think it's important for everybody to be able to download it and read it. It's a very easy read. And it's really just meant to validate and encourage you to sit with the feelings for as long as you need to, and that there's nothing wrong with you because you need to grieve something.
Someone in the chat room was, because we were talking about connecting with people, made a comment that I think is really valid, because I'm like this as well, and I think it's something that people have to understand about connection. And she says she doesn't really connect with people because she's choosy, and this is where I love Brene Brown. Where for some reason there's a belief that connecting with someone means that you have to let them in your life and know everything about you. And maybe we could talk about that, like, you can connect with someone and not let them in your private life.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And yeah, it is a great comment. And as a survivor, and really, even if you're not a survivor, we all have our own intimate things about us that you don't tell everybody. It's important to have a safe, small group of people, maybe literally, a handful of people who you can trust to talk about something. Something traumatic, talk about feelings, talk about emotions. But it's equally important to have friends who are just friends. People who will, you don't have to let everybody into your little inner circle, so to speak. It's okay to have, I have a lot of, maybe we'll call them acquaintances for lack of a better term.
Right.
Or friends who are just sports friends who are just music friends. When we get together with my one buddy, we don't talk about childhood sexual abuse. We talk about music and a concert we're going to, or we talk about work. I have some other friends where when we get together, all we talk about is the good old days, of being back and doing things in high school that we probably should never have done, but whatever. But yeah, I think it's important to connect with people and have different kinds of relationships. Have those, definitely, for sure, have those safe people, the ones that you can come to when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, when you're feeling a bit anxious, when you're feeling depressed, when you want to isolate, when you're confused, when you get triggered. Somebody who will hold a safe space and listen. But also have those people in your life who just want to talk about fun stuff, and people who just want to talk about you and them and your lives and things you want to do together, and just be whoever it is you want to be with them. As when you're healing through trauma, it's important to deal with it. We all know that. But it's also important to take that downtime and to have relationships with people that aren't always about letting everybody in to your little inner circle of healing, for so to speak. Because, if you are working through it and you're dealing with it and you're doing all the right things and you're healing, there's nothing wrong with going out and going out with the guys on a Friday night. There's nothing wrong with going out for with the girls for a shopping weekend or something, or just hanging out and watching movies and drinking wine and eating popcorn and just shooting the bull. When you connect with people, there are all different types of people, all different types of relationships, and everyone is important. And those people who aren't really in your inner circle can be just as important as those that are, because they offer you a time to just distract and just get away. And be like, you know what? I am not putting on my survivor hat right now. I am putting on my let's go have wings and beer hat, or let's go shopping hat, and just do it and have fun and decompress and don't think about anything and enjoy yourself and give yourself a break. That's the biggest thing. Give yourself a break.
Yeah, I have this I always say I have a therapist so I don't have to dump on my friends, right? I get to go dump on my therapist and then enjoy my family and my friends without making my friend, my best friend, my therapist. Brene Brown has a video. She's talking to Oprah Winfrey, but it's, I think it's called like 5 people to either not share your shame story with, but she talks about, this kind of misconception that the media puts out that we all have all these friends and we're all having coffee together and we're all just like sharing our lives and that's how life is. And it's actually not. I have one very close friend whom I explicitly trust to share everything and anything about my life with, right? She's what is called like the hide the body friend, okay? And then, I have a couple of other friends I know that I can call on in emergency. But other than that, I too have a lot of acquaintances whom I can share my trauma with or share a love of, like, I love to sing, I love poetry, I love writing, and not take it to that trauma place. And yeah, we can connect without having to always be vulnerable, and we should be careful who we're vulnerable with, because I'm even careful about who I tell my triggers to. Because
absolutely.
people will, there's some nasty people out there and they will take your triggers and use them as a weapon against you. So yes, it should take a long time to let someone in. And I've had people tell me, like you probably did, you're closed off, you have trust issues, things
you don't
like
open up, you're a closed book, all that stuff.
Right. When actually you're just taking some time. And I think that's, statements like that are a red flag for me. Like if someone doesn't understand that I need time, well, then they're probably not the right person for me.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. I mean, it takes a long time to cultivate a friendship that's safe enough for you to be able to disclose something traumatic about your life. And, those people are generally probably few and far between. And so, yeah, I mean, I've got literally a couple of people that I could call up or connect with in some way and share and just vent or be emotional with or whatever. Literally only a couple. Everybody else is really just kind of, I mean, they're friends and they're important to me and I appreciate them for what, they've been in my life, in whatever avenues they were, but they are not somebody who I'm either, A, close enough with, or B, maybe trust enough because, for many reasons to be able to share something. So I'm glad they're in my life and they have the role that they're in. But there's very few people that I really open up with and call at 2:00 in the morning being, feeling like overwhelmed about something or whatever. And, I am that kind of safe person for other people as well. So it's really, it's an honor to be able to open up to somebody and to be their safe person. But you're right. It's important to have those boundaries in your relationships and to have different kinds of relationships with people so that, each one can kind of serve you and you can serve them in the most effective way that's, healthy for both of you.
Yeah, and I've even learned too, like for instance, my best friend is not a trauma survivor, right? That trauma survivors don't always make the right support people because they're trying to support themselves too.
Oh, absolutely.
And so looking into that, going, okay, like maybe a hypothetical would be that a person has a friend and that friend is not giving to that person like they feel that friend should. Maybe then that moment you take a step back and go, okay, wait a minute. Am I expecting something from this person that they can't give me? There's certain things I can't give people because that's not within my scope of being comfortable, right? But to someone else, maybe that might look as flaky, or you see what I mean? Like it takes that understanding of knowing that someone isn't always the right person to be that support person for you.
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. And, I mean, you're right. Sometimes, and I think it's as important as it is for other people to understand that maybe, we aren't in a capacity to give them what they need, and for us to be understanding that they aren't in a capacity to give us what we need, and doesn't make us bad or makes them bad. It just means that their life is in a different spot. Maybe they haven't experienced anything that they can relate. Maybe you just have enough red flags that something has come up and they're just an acquaintance, and that's all, and that's okay. But yeah, I think it's a really keen awareness when you find those people who are trustworthy, and also be able to release yourself from the judgment that, you have a friend who's a trauma survivor, and maybe you go into this relationship, or maybe you go into this friendship or this or whatever, and you're thinking, yeah, we can support each other and we understand and we come from the same background, but then you realize maybe one of you was further along than the other one. Maybe the other one has accepted something the other one hasn't. Maybe the other one is just in a space to be able to do something that you're not. And, it doesn't mean that either of you are wrong. It just means that, being a trauma survivor is tough and it's hard, and everybody's journey is as different as the day is long. I know I keep saying that cliche. I think I heard it wrong.
No, but it's true. It's true.
It is. Yeah, I mean, everybody is different, and it doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. It's just that we have to be aware of who's safe for us, who is healthy for us. And if we make a judgment after some amount of time that they are safe, and then it backfires, it's not a reflection on us that we did something wrong. It just means that it didn't work out. Maybe they weren't transparent. Maybe they had some ulterior motives. As you mentioned, sharing your triggers with people. There's plenty of narcissists and other people out there who want to use your vulnerability against you. And if you don't see it coming, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just, you use it as a learning experience.
Yes.
And, I've been through that. I've opened up to people, and I'm like, after a while, I'm like, yeah, this person's safe. I'm going to share some stuff with them. And then, lo and behold, all of a sudden now they're backstabbing me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh crap. Well, I learned a lesson, and then I take that and I use it to my advantage in the future. Rather than beating myself up and saying, my God, I'm so stupid. Why did I not see that? I should have seen this coming. I'm shooting myself all over the place. And, take it, understand it was a learning experience, and, use it to your advantage, the next time, to maybe be, just understand that either it was a fluke situation, or maybe kind of improve your safe person radar, for lack of a better term. I mean, being a survivor is a ongoing learning experience. Mm-hmm. You never stop learning. You never stop healing, as I always say. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be, pitfalls along the way. There's going to be a boulder in your path that you're going to have to either go around or go through. And, learning all those things as you go along really helps build up your resiliency. It builds up your confidence. It builds up your self-awareness and your understanding about who you are and what you're capable of. And it's really all just a part of your own particular healing journey. And it's really something, it is.
It makes you pull back too. Sometimes for a while there, I would pull back and then not trust anyone. And I'm at a point now where, yes, I do definitely take my time. I mean, at this point, I'm not really looking to add new people into my personal life. I'm pretty happy where I am. However, I'm at a better place and a stronger place, and you do get to this place where if somebody does take your abuse and use it against you, that just makes them a really shitty person. And
of course it does.
You can just go, okay, that's a crappy person. So block or get out of my life, delete phone number. You're no longer welcome in my space. Maybe a little bit of grieving, right? Because that's a loss.
Definitely.
And then you learn to move through it and not let it affect you trusting in the future. That can be a struggle,
That is a huge struggle, because once you start questioning yourself, then you're bringing up all the things from the past of, now, I got hurt again, I must not be very aware, or I haven't healed enough, or, something's going to happen. And so I'm just going to shut everybody out and be a recluse and isolate and be alone again. And that's a really difficult thing to navigate. Because then, all of the old self-criticisms come back up, and all the things everybody ever told you start coming back up. Mm-hmm. And so it really just it's really kind of a process where, as you continue healing, you start to become more resilient and more able to handle those things. And yes, you absolutely have to grieve it, and sit with it and say, I'm angry about this, and maybe I should have done this, and maybe that would have happened. And
Why do
And
I
then,
keep attracting? This was mine. I'm always attracting. There must be something about me that attracts just like bad people,
yeah,
and,
never done
and
that.
maybe there was a little bit of something that I wasn't looking at myself, right? In on one side of it, and this is not a victim blaming thing, but I did have to look at this, where my self-esteem was at a certain place that I was allowing certain people in my life. I wasn't looking at myself that I deserved a higher quality or a person who was more healed, or however you want to define them, in my life, right? So that too had to change, was my self-perception, which changed my energy, let me set boundaries, and then I found the right friendships.
Yeah, that's a huge key right there, is boundaries, especially when you, as a survivor, we oftentimes don't have healthy boundaries, either because they were never modeled for us, we don't understand them, maybe we tried and it didn't work out. So you're right. I mean, as you learn about who you are and the safe people that you need to surround yourself with, maybe you do disclose too much too soon. Maybe you do try and just fit in and be with somebody because you want them to accept you because they have a certain status, or because somebody else thinks they're cool, or maybe you just want to fit in, and throughout, for whatever reason. And sometimes you allow yourself to be caught up in a situation that isn't necessarily healthy, but it's like, you know what, maybe I said too much, I was too soon to disclose something, maybe I chose to ignore the red flags that I saw were there. It happened. I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to really reevaluate my boundaries, maybe make some changes, maybe just understand that, it was a fluke situation, and I just need to keep moving forward, doing the best I can. So it's really about learning and enforcing those healthy boundaries.
I know you're doing a lot of work with helping people, and you do some recovery coaching and life transition coaching. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit. We have probably about 14 minutes left in the show. People can share their story on your blog. If you want to talk about how those processes go and what kind of work you do and how people can connect with you in that way.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So the blog, of course, is Surviving My Past. If you just Google it, it's there, or just go to survivingmypast.net. And really, that's my place where I share all my stories, but I also take a lot of guest bloggers, people who want to share their stories. And so if you want to submit your story to be possibly published on my blog, there are contact forms right up at the top. All you do is click on it, and then that sends me an email, and then I will contact you and we can get the process started. I'll send you like a little informational FAQ form that gives you all the lowdown if you want to join me on a podcast, if you want to submit a blog post. Surviving My Past has been there and will always be there. It's never going away. It's always going to be a place of healing, of validation. The blog that started everything, as I always like to say. I am in the process of finishing up my certifications, actually as we speak right now, to become a life transition and trauma recovery coach. I will be opening up an online and local presence here where I live in Central PA, but also mainly an online presence where I'll be doing life coaching, working with trauma survivors. And then I'll also be working with those who are going through major life transition. And so that's going to be a brand new website, which is getting ready to launch in late October. It's going to be called Beyond Your Past. Wow. And the website is called beyondyourpast.com. You can go there right now. There is just a welcome page up because I'm just finishing up building the website. But if you want to learn a little bit more about me and about what the coaching is, you can just leave your name and email, and I will get back to you once it's launched, and we can discuss, if working with a life coach might be right for you. There's differences between life coaching and therapy, but the main thing I like to always say, and the main thing that's important from a survivor perspective, is no matter who you work with, be trauma informed. Have that professional be trauma informed. Of course, I am trauma informed.
How do you know that they are? Can you help the listeners
I tell you
how to check that?
Well, honestly, I think really one of the best ways to do it is to just ask. Some therapists, coaches, counselors will tell you they're trauma informed. Sometimes they don't. So, if you're seeking help working with any type of professional, one of the first things that you always ask them in the initial session is, are you trauma informed? And figure out how they're trauma informed. what's their method for working with trauma survivors. What type of trauma survivors do they specialize in? Have they ever worked with one at all? What their resources do they have? What credentials do they have? What type of experiences do they have? And if you're a trauma survivor, even if you're not going to necessarily work on trauma related things, it's important that your professional be trauma informed, because as you know, trauma manifests itself in so many ways. So that's, in your career, in your family, in your relationships, in your hobbies, in your friendships, in your alone time. And it's important to have somebody who understands how the trauma can kind of creep back in and affect your feelings and your life and everything about you. So when you're working on some type of goal or some new type of thing that you want to do, some major life transition, whatever it is, having somebody who's trauma informed who can say, well, yes, we are working through A, B, and C, but where is this negative mindset coming from?
Right.
Where are these self-defeating thoughts coming from? Let's kind of explore that. Oh, maybe it's coming from your trauma. Well, how do we work through that? And so, as I said, while coaching is not therapy, having a trauma-informed coach is really something that I'm really passionate about. I'm grateful to be able to do this, and I'm excited to be able to work with those who are going through a life transition. Perhaps maybe you've been out of the workforce for a long time and you want to get back into it. Maybe you just got out of a long-term relationship. Maybe there's a new member of the family coming. Any kind of thing that causes you to pause and be like, oh God, now what do I do? Oh my God, what's going on? I can't handle this. I don't know where to start. Working with a life coach basically takes you as you are right now and says, okay, I'm here. This is what my life's about. This is who I am. This is where I'm at. Where do I want to go? Well, I want to accomplish these things, and I want to change these mindsets, and I want to work through this or work towards that. Well, then as a coach, I'll be able to work with you, understand where you're coming from, and help you put plans in place, set doable, workable steps that help you achieve what you want to achieve out of life, to help you change that mindset, to work through this new project that you're doing. From a trauma, survivor perspective, understanding how that affects your life in a daily situation, and why you wake up every day going, dreading what's coming instead of embracing it. And, why you wake up every day filled with anxiety, and maybe, how flashbacks incorporate into all this, and, how things all, how everything dates back to your trauma, and how you can work through it, and what have you done so far, and what can we do now? And, what have you done in the past that's worked for you that maybe we can expound upon? And so it's really about, I'm just so stoked, because it's going to be a career change for me, getting out of corporate America. I'm going to be working solely, as a coach, and really just kind of finally, after being 40-something years old, finding my life calling and understanding that, working in corporate America served its purpose for a time. It's been a vehicle to get me here. Now I'm here. Now I know that when I am fully alive, when I feel fulfilled and inspired and encouraged, is when I am writing, when I'm podcasting, when I'm working with somebody in a coaching role, and I'm helping them in ways that people helped me. That is my life purpose. That's what I'm all about. That's what I want to share with others. Inspire that message of hope. Fill them with the encouragement and the validation of everything they've overcome, and how empowered they really are, how they aren't defined by their past, what's ahead for them, in ways that maybe they haven't even seen, and help them explore avenues that they never thought they could.
What do you do? And really, really briefly, I'm just kind of curious about this. What do you do when you encounter someone who's not ready? They think they're ready, right? They think they're ready. But you're watching them, they're not ready. They're not really ready to make that choice, right? Because you're looking at behaviors, which I always look, if I'm angry about something or I'm hurt about something, I'm connecting it right now. I have this tool. But there's some people who think they're ready to change, but they're really not. How do you handle that?
Well, I think in reality is, first of all, you give them kudos and props and inspire them, because they are trying to take a step in the right direction. And maybe you're not ready yet. Maybe you want to be ready, but you're not quite there yet. And that's where maybe going and working with a licensed mental health professional to kind of get you, kind of going in the right direction and work through some of the deep traumatic memories and thoughts and mindsets that you still have that are holding you back from really being the person that you want to be. So, working with a life coach, if somebody doesn't really seem to be ready, their heart's not into it, they're not following through, they're not engaging, they're not putting in the time and effort that's needed, then maybe I would likely refer them to, one of the people who are in my network, who are trauma-informed therapists or a psychologist, and say, hey, I would love to work with you. I'm excited about your future. Maybe there's some things that we need to get ironed out, with a different, a professional. And then when you're in that space to come back, I'll be right here ready to work with you in the future. So.
I love that so much. I mean, I just love you for that, because there's, I've often felt some kind of way about life coaches because of the deep trauma that exists out there, and worrying because I've had so many people feel they were taken. And it's just very refreshing to hear you say that you can recognize when something might be beyond your scope or needs a different type of concentration, and you're willing to say, listen, this person might be a better fit for you. And that is just so important, to be that open. I really thank you for.
Thanks for joining me, Vennie Kocsis, and remember, get through it, don't stay in it.